Chapter 9. Fruit. Raj is waiting at the curb. His eyes are fixed on the cars driving up and down the street. My grandfather stomps over to him, digging in his backpack. It's my old one from elementary school. It has kittens on it. I thought it was a little uncool for him, but he told me it was a perfectly good backpack and he didn't care what people might think. "You!" my grandfather shouts. Raj turns and watches us. His eyes flickered to me briefly before returning to my grandfather. My grandfather pulls out the papers and shoves them into Raj's hands. "Read 'em and weep," he says. Raj scans them, then he looks up. "Most of these were published over 30 years ago." My grandfather is stunned into a momentary silence and then says, "Einstein published a long time ago, too. Are you going to poo-poo him?" "You're being a little ridiculous," Raj says. A compact car pulls up to the curb, a teenager behind the wheel. He has the same dark eyes as Raj, but looks a few years older. Raj folds his tall frame into the front seat. "Ridiculous, huh?" my grandfather sputters. "What do you know anyway? You're just a kid." Raj leans out the open window, gives my grandfather a slow look. "I don't know. You're a kid, too." He pauses. "What do you know?" When we get home, my grandfather heads straight for the kitchen. "I'm starving," he says. "I'll heat up some burritos," I say. There's probably not a more perfect combination than rice, refried beans, and cheese. He makes himself a cup of hot tea to go with his burrito. He pours the steaming water into the mug with precision, adds 2 perfect spoonfuls of sugar, and methodically stirs the sugar like he's making a formula. It makes me think of the mad scientist conversation. "I liked what you talked about at lunch," I confess. "You know, about science. But how do you start?" He looks up from his tea. "What do you mean?" "In a puzzle, I always begin with a straight edge piece. If you wanted to cure polio or anything, where would you even start?" "With your eyes, of course," he says. "Eyes?" He looks up at the bowl of fruit on the counter. "For example, that bowl of fruit, what do you see?" he asks. It's a battered wooden bowl. There are a few apples, a banana, some pears, and a mango. I'm pretty sure my mom got the mango on sale because she doesn't usually buy them otherwise. "A bowl of fruit?" I say. "Is the fruit dead or alive?" He probes. I look at it more closely. The apples are red and shiny, and the banana doesn't have any bruises. "Alive." He picks up an apple, turning it. "Is it, though? Is it attached to a root system? Is it ingesting nutrients, water? All those are signs of life." I guess not," I say. He waves the apple at me. "It actually begins dying the minute you pick it." Then he goes to the counter and takes a knife from the butcher block. He slices into the apple, exposing a neat row of dark brown seeds. "Now," he says, touching them with the tip of his knife, "what about these?" "Dead?" I guess. "This is trickier. They're dormant, waiting. Bury them in the soil, give them water and sunlight, and they'll grow. In a way, they're immortal. And they were inside the apple all along." I'm kind of blown away. I thought science was all experiments and laboratories, I admit. My grandfather shakes his head. "The most powerful tool of scientists is observation. Galileo, the father of modern science, observed that Jupiter had moons orbiting it, proving that the Earth was not the center of everything. His observations forced people to think differently about their place in the universe." Then he looks around and says, "But now that you've mentioned it, I am going to need a laboratory." "For what?" "For analyzing the T. Malvinus when we get it back, of course," he says, like it's obvious. "I need to replicate my results if I'm going to publish." I think for a minute. Our house isn't exactly huge. "What about the garage?" I suggest. We go out to the garage and my grandfather does a slow tour. One half is clear from my mom's car, but the other side is stacked with boxes of props from her shows over the years. There's an old workbench that was my dad's, our bikes, and a freezer. My mom likes to stock up on frozen food before she goes into production on a show. My grandfather rubs a non-existent beard on his chin. "Electricity, decent lighting. It's not climate controlled, but it could be worse. At least I'm not in the desert like Oppenheimer."